The silent war begins asterisk. The year is 35-6. Earth is no longer alone in the galaxy. Humans have traveled far. They built space stations, made colonies on other planets, and met alien races. But peace did not last. A deadly enemy arrived. The swarm. No one knew where they came from. They were fast, silent, and merciless. They destroyed entire cities in hours. They did not speak. They did not ask for peace. They only killed. The humans tried to fight, but they were not ready. Thousands of soldiers died. Ships exploded in space. Hope was falling. Then Earth joined a powerful group of alien races, the Union of Species. The Union had many strong members, bird-like warriors, insect people, energy beings, and one feared race called the Gurthok, tall, muscular giants with 4 arms and dark skin like stone. They stood over 8 feet tall. They looked like monsters. Humans didn't trust the Gurthok. They looked dangerous. They didn't speak much. Their eyes glowed red. Most humans whispered, "Never turn your back to a Gurthok." But the Union believed in something called the bonding program. One human, one alien, joined together mentally and emotionally. The Union said, only when 2 minds understand each other can real strength be born. Many alien races joined this program, but not a single human agreed until now. Sergeant Ray Carter stood at the edge of a cold steel platform on Station 09, a military base floating above Mars. His eyes were tired. His face was full of scars. His hands shook a little. He had seen too much war. He had lost too many friends. He had nothing left. A voice called behind him, "Sergeant Carter, the Gurthok waits." Ray turned and walked slowly into the chamber. Inside, the room was dark. Steam rose from the ground. A strange hum filled the air. And in the center stood the alien Theric, 8 feet tall, 4 arms crossed, skin like armor, a heavy metal collar around his neck, a symbol of the bonding trial. Ray looked up. The alien stared down. Long silence. Then the alien spoke, voice deep like thunder. "You are small, weak. Why are you here?" Ray didn't flinch. He replied calmly, "Because everyone else is afraid." Theric narrowed his glowing eyes. "And you are not." Ray gave a small smile. "I'm already dead inside." A strange silence followed. Then, slowly, Theric stepped forward. He raised one hand. Ray did the same. Their palms touched. A bright blue light exploded from their hands. The room shook. Images flashed in both minds. Ray saw Theric past a burning jungle. The screams of his family. Betrayal by his own kind. Years of war and pain. Theric saw Ray's memories. A team of human soldiers laughing. Then dying one by one. Blood and fire. Ray alone in the mud, crying. Both stepped back, breathing hard. The bond had started. The room fell silent again. A voice came from the wall speaker. "Bonding success. 42%. Mental link forming. Caution advised." Ray looked at Theric. "Guess we're teammates now." Theric gave a strange sound, half growl, half laugh. "You will die fast, human." Ray shrugged. "We'll see." Outside the room, other soldiers watched through a screen. Some were shocked. Others were angry. "He's bonding with that thing," one officer whispered. "He's lost his mind," said another. "Maybe he's the only one who hasn't," said a quiet voice. Later that night, Ray sat alone in his quarters. He stared at a picture, his old squad, smiling faces. All gone now. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The door opened. Theric stood there. "Tomorrow, we fight together. Behind enemy lines." Ray nodded slowly. "Yeah, they said it's a suicide mission." Theric stepped forward. "Then we die together." Ray looked at the alien. For the first time in months, something lit in his eyes. "Or we survive together." The alien gave a sharp nod. In the silence, something powerful was born. Not just a bond, but trust. But they didn't know. On the other side of the galaxy, the Zavok swarm was already moving. And someone inside the Union didn't want this bond to succeed. The night was cold inside the steel walls of Station 09. And Sergeant Ray Carter could not sleep. His mind was a storm, filled with flashes of Theric-esque red glowing eyes, and the strange blue light that came during the first touch. A touch that changed something inside him. Something he did not fully understand. Yet he walked alone to the ritual chamber, where the air was thick and heavy, where no other human had dared to go. But Ray was not like the others anymore. He had lost everything, and maybe that loss gave him the power to face something greater. Something alienous. He entered the room. The ground beneath his boots trembled. and the walls pulsed with a living hum, almost like the station was watching him, judging him, waiting to see if the bond would break him or make him something new. Thrak stood in the center, unmoving, like a mountain carved from shadow and fire, his forearms crossed, his eyes burning like twin suns trapped behind storm clouds. And when Ray stepped closer, the alien finally spoke. His voice low and deep, like a falling star crashing into the ocean. "You returned," Thrak said. "Not many Doi said I would," Ray answered. "And I keep my word. Then come." The alien replied. Let the ritual begin. Blue light filled the chamber as the machine activated. 1,000 tiny needles of energy wrapped around them, scanning their hearts, their minds, their fears, and their hopes, while the ground below opened into a pool of living memory. Glowing and pulsing with past and pain, Ray was pulled into Tharek's mind, and suddenly he was running through burning forests, his feet pounding on cracked earth, his lungs filled with smoke as he held a small child with black stone skin, screaming and coughing, while behind him roared fire and death. He saw giant shadows fall from the sky, metal beasts that spoke in commands and lasers. And then he saw Tharek, younger, weaker, crying over a broken family, fists clenched, a vow of vengeance written in his blood. Then the vision shifted, and Tharek entered Ray's mind, saw human cities, warm dinners, laughter among soldiers, a little metal badge in Ray's hand, engraved with his name and the names of his squad. Then explosions, blood on the walls, a scream so sharp it cut the soul, and Ray on his knees, his eyes empty, holding the badge like a prayer that no one answered. The pain passed through both of them, like wind through a broken door. And when it was over, they were still standing, their hands still joined. And the machine's voice spoke again, cold and emotionless. Bond level 59% and rising. Ray took a step back, his breathing hard, his chest tight, his face pale but calm, and he looked at Tharek, who also seemed shaken, but steadier now, more focused, as if something inside him had finally found a match. That was not easy. Ray said. It is never easy, Tharek replied. True bonds are not made with smiles, they are made with scars outside the chamber. Other humans watched through glass, their faces full of confusion and fear, and some laughed quietly, calling Ray a fool, a traitor, a man who had lost his mind. But one young technician whispered under her breath, "Maybe he's the only one doing the right thing." That night, Ray and Tharek sat across from each other in the quiet training hall, a place that smelled of old sweat and metal, where thousands had trained to fight and die. And now 2 soldiers from different worlds shared a single bowl of protein paste, bland but warm. "Do you still think I am weak?" Ray asked. "No," Tharek replied. "Now I think you are broken, but strong in your breaking." Ray smiled without smiling, his eyes soft but tired. And then he asked, "Why did you agree to bond with a human? You hate us, don't you?" "I do not hate," Tharek said slowly. I remember what humans did in the early wars. I remember the burning skies. But I also remember that not all fire destroys. Some fire gives light." Ray said nothing, because sometimes silence speaks louder than any word. And in that silence, they both felt something shift again, the bond growing deeper, the machine's sensors blinking quietly in the walls, unnoticed by them. But later, a mission order came through the speaker, a voice full of urgency and threat. "Trey Carter and Tharek, report to Deck 7, infiltration, unit required, high-risk operation. Departure in 4 hours." They looked at each other, not as enemies now, not even as strangers, but as 2 warriors tied by pain and purpose. And Ray stood first, stretching his back, feeling the old wounds ache. Then said, "Looks like we're going behind enemy." Linus rose like a storm, his voice like distant thunder. "Then let the enemy feel our bond in the shadows of Station 09. 2 souls prepared for war, not as man and alien, but as something new, something the galaxy had never seen. And far away, in the cold dark of space, something ancient watched them, waiting to strike. Darkness surrounded the stealth ship, as it floated silently above a dead moon where no birds flew, no winds blew, and no light touched the ground below. And inside the ship sat 2 warriors from different worlds, one made of flesh and pain and the other of stone and memory. Sergeant Ray Carter adjusted the strap on his armor, feeling the weight of the past pressing against his chest, like a hand that refused to let go. And across from him sat Tharek, with arms folded, eyes glowing faintly in the dark, his breath slow and steady like a storm waiting to break. The mission was clear but deadly: drop into the outer edge of the Tsar Vox zone, locate a missing Union scout team, gather any data and extract quietly. But Ray already knew nothing about this mission would be quiet, and nothing would be simple. They landed in silence. their boots touching the surface of the moon like ghosts walking through a forgotten world, and as they moved forward the ground beneath them cracked softly like it remembered every step of every soldier who had fallen here before. No sign of life, Ray whispered, scanning the area with his visor. Just dust and rock and ruins that once held life. The rack moved ahead without fear, his senses alert, his body low, his hand pressed against the ground, and then he spoke, his voice calm but heavy. There is blood here, but no bodies. They moved deeper through broken structures, half buried under ash and silence. Walls marked by claw-patterned symbols that twisted the iron made the stomach turn, and Ray felt a coldness crawl into his spine. Scout team came through here, he said. Their signal was lost, just beyond that ridge. Tar Rack nodded, and together they climbed the jagged hill, their legs aching, their breath rising in short clouds of fog, and when they reached the top they saw wrecked Union transport blackened by fire, metal torn like paper, engines still glowing faint blue, and nearby lay something else, something worse. 5 Union soldiers, their suits torn open, but no blood, no wounds, just empty lifeless faces staring upward, as if death had come, not with pain, but with a whisper. Ray knelt beside one of them, his hand shaking slightly. He reached for the man's ID tag and read the name. Slowly, almost like a prayer. Private Ellis Carter. He froze a second longer than he should have, then stood without a word, his jaw tight, his eyes burning behind the visor. Rack stepped beside him, his voice quiet but firm. Family, my brother, Ray said, then turned away, not wanting to feel, not now, not here. Before they could move, a sound rose from the shadows, a low chittering like metal teeth grinding on stone, and from the dark came a shape like nothing they had seen before. A Zarvak drone, but twisted, larger, faster, covered in bone-like armor, and glowing lines that pulsed like veins of fire. Run! Ray shouted, but it was too late. The creature leaped toward them, and in that moment everything moved like lightning, and Brogatharik met the beast midair, his arms locked with its claws, their bodies crashing into the wall, sending shards of rock flying, and Ray raised his weapon and fired, but the bullets barely scratched its hide. The drone screamed and knocked Theric aside, turning toward Ray with eyes like molten gold, and for a second Ray felt fear like ice in his blood, but then something inside him snapped. He charged forward, dodging left, sliding low beneath its swing, and planting a mine on its side, before diving for cover. As the explosion lit up the sky in blue, and black smoke filled the air, and the beast screamed. But still it stood, limping, but alive, and angrier than before, and Ray's heart sank, as he realized this thing was made to survive, made to kill. Rose again, his shoulder bleeding, his voice roaring with fury, and he lunged with all 4 arms, grabbing the drone's head, twisting and pulling, until, with a crack and a scream, the beast fell silent. At last silence returned, broken only by the sound of heavy breathing and flickering flames, and as the smoke cleared, Ray looked at Rack and saw something new in the alien's eyes, not just strength but pain. They are changing. Rack said slowly, they are not what they were. Ray nodded, wiping blood from his forehead. We need to get that data and get out of here. Now inside the crashed ship, they found a data core still glowing, still alive, and when Ray plugged in his device, the screen showed something they were not ready to see: images of strange machines working on Zarvak creatures, inserting metal into bone, injecting dark fluids into veins, creating hybrids. Part machine, part monster, and in the corner of the screen, a Union symbol blinking softly. Ray stared in disbelief, and Theric growled, "Loath is not war, this is betrayal." They downloaded everything and ran into the shadows, not knowing who would come next, or what horrors were now hunting them, and as they disappeared into the darkness, the moon behind them began to tremble, ever so slightly, as if it too feared what was coming. They had come for answers, and found something far worse, and now they had to survive long enough to tell the truth. The night was endless, on the broken moon, and the stars above felt colder than ice as Ray and Theric moved through the dust, with their hearts racing and their minds burning with questions that would not rest, and could not wait. They had seen too much already: the bodies without wounds, the Zarvak drone that felt more machine than creature, and now the data core filled with horrors and secrets that smelled of lies and betrayal. They ran through the narrow canyons under shadows sharp as blades, and when the wind rose, it carried a sound like distant whispers, like voices trapped in the dust, calling them deeper into the dark, where the answers waited with open jaws. "We are not alone here," Ray said, without turning his voice. A whisper caught in the wind. No, Theric answered. "There are eyes in the stone." They followed the signal hidden deep inside the data core, a strange pulse that pulled them across the terrain, like a compass made of fear and curiosity, and soon they found it: a cave half swallowed by the land, with walls black as oil, and a glow that came from somewhere beneath. Ray looked at the entrance, and felt a chill, not from the air, but from something older, something wrong, and when he stepped inside it was like walking into a forgotten memory. That was not his own. The walls of the cave were alive, with carvings, glowing lines that moved slowly like rivers of light telling a story that neither man nor alien had ever seen before, and as they walked deeper the air grew thick and warm, and the silence turned heavy, as if the cave itself was holding its breath. Then they found the chamber, and everything changed. A dome of ancient metal stood before them, wide and tall, with symbols that flickered in every language at once, and inside it they saw them, not soldiers, not drones, but children. Children floating in glass chambers, sleeping, breathing, dreaming, unaware of the war outside. There were hundreds of them, maybe more, small and still and peaceful, and Ray felt something crack inside his chest, something soft and broken that had not moved in years. "These are not monsters," he said slowly, barely able to believe his own voice. "These are just kids." Theric moved closer, his eyes fixed on the machines surrounding the children. Machines with Union markings, glowing quietly, feeding the chambers with dark liquid and pulses of strange light. "This is where the drones come from," Theric said, the voice lower than ever. "This is not natural. This is not war. This is creation." Ray found a console covered in dust and opened the logs. The screen blinked to life, showing video after video of Union scientists talking calmly about tests, about results, about weaponized growth and mental control. And then one voice appeared, clear and colder. "Zavak are useful." Once broken, the voice said, "Their instincts are strong, their minds simple. With the right implants they serve, without question, they fight. Without rest they fear nothing." Ray stepped back, his head spinning and his hands shaking. This was not what they were told. This was not a war of defense. This was something else, something darker. "We have to show this to command," he said. "The world needs to see this." But even as he said it, the air shifted, and the cave lights blinked, a second too long, and from above came the sound of boots, metal heavy and cruel. "The Union is already here," Theric said, his arms rising, his eyes glowing. "This place was never lost. They let us come." Ray grabbed the data drive and ran behind Theric, as black armored soldiers dropped from the ceiling, weapons raised, eyes hidden behind masks, and without a word they opened fire. The cave shook as beams of light crashed into the stone, but Theric was a wall of fury, moving like thunder, throwing one soldier into another, while Ray fired behind cover, trying to reach the exit, with the truth still burning in his pocket. One blast hit his shoulder, and he fell with a cry, but Rack lifted him like a child, and charged through the flames, roaring so loud it felt like the cave itself screamed with him. They burst from the cave into the cold light of the dead moon, bleeding, breathing, barely alive, but alive, and behind them the entrance collapsed as the Union sealed the truth once again. Beneath silence and stone they found their ship damaged and waiting, barely able to fly, and Ray climbed in with pain biting his bones, while Theric stood outside one last moment, looking at the stars above, as if asking them a question no one could answer. "You knew, didn't you?" Ray asked. "As the engines came alive, you knew they were not what they claimed." "I knew there were lies," Theric answered. "I did not know the weight of them then." "Let's tell the galaxy," Ray said, holding the drive tight. "Let's show them what monsters really look like." The ship rose, shaking and broken, but rising, and behind them the cave faded into dust. Once more though, truth had been found, the lies had been exposed, but the danger was only beginning, because those who build monsters never let them go without a fight. The ship trembled as it rose from the broken moon, smoke pouring from its left wing, sparks dancing across the control panel, while Sergeant Ray Carter held the pilot's stick tight, blood slipping down his arm and breath ragged, as alarms screamed in every direction. And behind him Theric stood like a statue, his huge hands gripping the roof for balance as the stars above twisted and turned into fire and warning lights. "They were coming," Ray said, between his teeth, and Theric growled deep in his chest like an old mountain waking from sleep. "We must not fall now," he said, "not after what we have seen." The Union ships appeared on the radar like hunters closing around a wounded animal, sharp, fast, and silent, as shadows moving through the black sky with deadly precision. And Ray knew the old ship was not built for this kind of chase. Not anymore, not after years of rust and battle. But they had no choice, no time, no hope, except forward. He pushed the thrusters, and the ship screamed louder, like it knew what waited ahead, and did not want to go. But still they flew, dodging debris, weaving through old satellite rings, and slipping between broken fragments of forgotten stations, each second a miracle, each breath a battle. The Union ships fired beams of white heat that cut across space like blades, and Ray spun hard, his injured shoulder crying out. But he did not stop. He could not stop, not when the truth sat inside his jacket, still warm, still full of light and pain, and proof that the galaxy was being lied to by those who smiled in the name of peace. Theric moved to the weapons system, placing his massive arms over the controls. His fingers strange but quick, and with a roar, he returned fire, sending bursts of plasma toward their pursuers, explosions blooming in the dark like dying stars, and one Union ship fell into silence, and flame another approaches tar. Rack said, and Ray turned the ship hard to the left, barely missing a floating mine that had no business being there, and he realized the Union had laid traps across the sector, not to stop enemies, but to keep secrets. Buried one shot slammed into their engine, and the ship spun end over end, and Ray shouted as he fought the spin, and the stars became a blur, and Theric held the frame so it would not tear apart from inside, and for a second it felt like they would be lost, swallowed by the gravity of a nearby planet. Waiting like a mouth open wide, but Ray gritted his teeth, and found the line of escape. A narrow path between two moons, and he flew through it blind, trusting instinct, memory, and rage, as the Union ships pulled back, knowing the path was too dangerous, too sharp, too wild for their clean machines. When they cleared the storm, the ship was broken, the lights were dying, the systems were failing, and Ray collapsed into the seat, breathing like a man who had drowned, and come back in. Theric sat down beside him, his face bruised, his body marked by fire, but his eyes still full of fight. "We cannot go far in this ship," Theric said. "We must find shelter soon." Ray nodded, and searched the star maps for something, anything, and found an old outpost, once used for deep space mining, now abandoned. Or forgotten, but still listed with life support, and a beacon too faint to catch normal scans. "We go there," he said, and the ship limped through space, leaving behind trails of smoke and silence. The outpost was cold, dead, and covered in dust, but it welcomed them like a tomb with open arms, and when they landed, the ship groaned one last time, and shut down forever inside the outpost. Ray uploaded the data to a portable drive, made a backup, and sent a signal to Earth, a broken message filled with fragments of truth, images of the Zogfok children, the labs, the dead soldiers, and the Union symbol, flashing over every file like a mark of shame. Then he sat back, his body aching, his vision fading, and he turned to Tar. Rack, who stood beside a broken window watching the stars in silence. "I thought we were finished back there," Ray said. "You still breathe," Theric replied, "and that is enough for now." Ray smiled without smiling, because pain had taken all his strength, and then the alert came. A flashing red symbol, blinking across the screen, and Theric stepped forward, his voice low. "Someone heard us." The signal repeated 3 times, then vanished, and for a long moment they said nothing. Because they knew the Union would come again, and this time they would not bring warnings, they would bring war. "We need to move," Ray said, his hand gripping the data like it was the last piece of his soul and Tar. Rack lifted him onto his back without a word, because no soldier walks alone, not anymore, not now, not after all they had seen and done, and survived. They disappeared into the dark hallways of the outpost, leaving behind a dead ship, a shattered mission, and a truth so dangerous it could burn worlds and save them all at the same time. The ship that found them was not Union, not military, not clean and bright, but instead old, patched, and full of rust, a rebel scout hidden under fake signals, moving through forgotten systems. And when they opened the hatch and saw Ray Carter covered in dust, bleeding, and carrying a strange black alien on his back, they did not ask questions. They only pulled them inside and shut the doors. Before the scanners could see, Ray opened his eyes on a medical bed wrapped in wires, breathing through tubes as machines beeped quietly around him, and his hand held tightly to the small data drive that now lived in his pocket, like a heartbeat that would not stop. And beside him, Theric stood silent, and still watching over him like a guardian of stone. The rebels did not know what to do at first, because they had never seen a Gurthok that was not trying to kill them, and never seen a human soldier protecting one like a brother. And when Ray woke and told them everything, some listened, and some walked away in silence, afraid of what they now believed might be truth. They reached Earth orbit under false ID codes, floating in the shadow of a junk freighter, and Ray stepped onto the surface again for the first time in 1 year. No medals, no welcome, no cheers, only gray sky, hard ground, and cold wind. And he walked with a limp and a fire in his chest. The media said he had returned, said he was alive, but changed. And then the government said nothing. And then the government sent soldiers to bring him in quietly, without a fight, but Ray refused to hide and stood in front of the Parliament building with a microphone and a burning truth. "Lead," he said into the cameras, into the silence of millions watching, on every screen, across every colony. "They lied to you, to me, to the galaxy. The war is not what you think. The enemy is not who they told us, and I have proof." He uploaded the data live, sent it to 10,000 systems, to 100 channels, and people saw everything: the children, the machines, the Union lab coats, the whispers, the plans, and the monsters created in secret hand. Then the sky fell. First came the silence, then came the voices and the anger. Some believed him, some called him broken, some said hero, Some said traitor, and the government said nothing for 1 day, then 2, then 3, and then finally, they arrested him at night without warning, with no trial, no defense, just walls and shadows. They put him in a black cell under the earth with lights that never turned off, and guards who never spoke, and doctors who asked if the alien had twisted his mind, and Ray said nothing, because silence now hurt less than repeating the truth over and over to ears. Already, Shadrach vanished after the arrest. Some said he escaped, some said he died, some said he was never real. Just a story made to make a man's madness look like courage, but far in the old cities hidden under noise and lights. The rebels moved quietly now, carrying copies of the data, whispering his name like fire in the dark. 1 month passed, then 2, and the world changed slowly. Cities filled with protests, soldiers removed badges, students raised banners, and workers shut down. Power grids all asking the same thing: why did you lie, and why did you fear one soldier, with one truth inside his cell? Ray kept counting days on the wall, 1 scratch for each, and then one night the lights flickered and the air changed, and the door opened with a hiss, and he stood ready to fight. But no guard came, only a face from the past. The rebel pilot who saved him once now stood there again, eyes sharp, voice fast. "We are getting you out," she said. "The people want answers, the people are ready, and you are still the one they want to hear." Ray followed her through the halls, now empty, now shaking, now lit by fires. Far away, and when they reached the roof, a small ship waited, black and fast and ready, and as they flew over the city, he looked down and saw crowds filling the streets, waving signs with his name, and chanting words he never thought he would hear. Again, Ray Carter, truth lives, truth breeds, truth fights. He turned to the pilot and asked, "Why now, what changed?" And she smiled with tired eyes. "Because they tried to bury you," she said, "and instead they planted you, and now you grow like..." A storm a beep from the dashboard broke the silence, a signal from deep space, encrypted and strange and old and full of static. And then a voice came through, a voice like stone and fire and wind. "I am alive," it said, "and I am waiting, Tharek." Ray whispered, and the pilot nodded yes, "and he wants to finish what you both started." Ray closed his eyes and let the sound fill his bones, and in that moment the sky seemed open. Again, not as prison, but as path, and he knew the fight was not over. Yet, not ever. The stars moved slow above the rebel fleet as it drifted beyond the edge of mapped space, silent and unseen, like a whisper before the storm, and inside the command ship stood Sergeant Ray Carter, now dressed in black armor, marked with no flag, no nation, no symbol, only purpose, and across from him stood Tar. Rack, larger than ever, with new scars across his arms and a fire in his eyes that had never gone out. The message had been simple, but powerful. One final chance to reveal the truth, one final push to end the silence, and one final strike against the core of the Union machine, where the lies began, where the monsters were born, and where the galaxy was chained without knowing. "We do not come to destroy," Ray said to the rebels gathered around the table. "We come to wake." The world. Thurek nodded, and placed a heavy hand on the map glowing before them, pointing to the target, the Citadel of Order, floating above the ruined planet of Vex Prime, the place where the Union kept its oldest secrets, its strongest weapons, and its darkest truths. "They will fight with all they have," Theric said, "and we must fight with all we are." The fleet moved as one through the black like a wave of defiance, cutting through fear, and when the Citadel appeared on the screens, it looked like a blade buried in the stars, sharp, cold, and ready to bleed anyone who dared come close. The Union ships rose to meet them, rows of silver and blue forming walls of fire and steel, and the rebels did not flinch, did not turn, did not doubt, because they followed a man who had been broken and rebuilt, and an alien who had once been feared and now was followed. The battle began with no warning, like crashing against light metal, tearing into metal, voices crying across channels, and Ray flew his ship straight into the fire. Thurak beside him, manning the guns with a roar that shook the missiles, flew past their wings. Beams scorched the hull, and alarms screamed, but Ray pushed forward, weaving through chaos while Thurak fired with perfect aim, taking down enemies like falling stars. They broke through the outer wall of defense, barely alive, their ship burning but still flying, and before them stood the Citadel gates, tall and black and full of rage, and Ray turned to Thurak and spoke without fear. "We end it now together." They jumped into the core halls of the Citadel, moving through cold metal corridors where guards in golden armor waited, ready, but not ready enough for what came. Ray moved like fire, his fists and rifle dancing through shadows and blood, while Theric was a storm crashing through enemy lines with roars and strikes, and the bond between them now, a living thing stronger than any shield. They reached the main chamber, and there stood the council, 9 voices behind masks, speaking as one, calling Ray a traitor, a weapon of chaos, calling Tar Rack a mistake that should have stayed buried, and still the two walked forward with truth in their hands, and war in their eyes. The truth burns louder than silence. Ray said, and we are done, Neatlingtar. Rack raised his arms, and the council guards charged, but the rebels broke through behind them, filling the room with fire and noise, and the walls shook, and the ceiling cracked, and still the council sat unmoved, until Ray placed the data drive in the center of the table, and let the world whistle across the galaxy. Screens lit up, showing the children in the tanks, the hybrid drones, the experiments, the lies, and for the first time in centuries the council had no words outside. The Citadel, the battle-turned tides union. Ships began to fall back, some refused to fire, some turned to defend the rebels, and some simply shut down their weapons and wait. Is done, Theric said, breathing heavy. Not yet. Ray answered and walked to the center of the chamber, standing beneath the great Union flag, and pulling it down with one motion, folding it, placing it on the ground, not in hate but in warning. Build again, he said, but build honest. The rebels left the Citadel with the files, the proof, the message, and the galaxy began to change, not in fire, but in voice, as planets spoke up, as soldiers laid down weapons, as leaders stepped forward to ask what else had been hidden. Ray Carter was not called hero by all. Some still feared him, some still blamed him, but none could ignore him. And when he stood beside Theric in front of the Galactic Forum, months later, dressed not in armor but in plain clothes and simple words, the silence broke for good. This is my brother, Ray said, and we were meant to kill each other, and now we stand to protect each other, and that is the future. I want to believe in. The Forum voted, and the council fell, and from its ashes something new began, something imperfect, but open, and in that moment, the war truly ended. And Theric left without speeches, without medals, without titles, walking into the stars, where no map reached, because some stories do not end, they become legend, and legends walk far.